The Venetian in Las Vegas. Let's continue. We've got an email question that was left to CNNPolitics.com. This is from a Mike Richards who says, with the controversy surrounding Robert Jeffress, is it acceptable to let the issue of a candidate's faith shape the debate? Senator Santorum, this is in reference to a Baptist pastor who at the Values Voter Summit, after introducing Governor Rick Perry, said that Mitt Romney is not a Christian and that Mormonism is a cult. Those were his words. Should voters pay attention to a candidate's religion?
I think they should pay attention to the candidate's values, what the candidate stands for. That's what's at play, and the person's faith. And you look at that faith and what the faith teaches with respect to morals and values that are reflected in that person's belief structure. So those are important things. I'm a Catholic. Catholic has social teachings. Catholic has teachings as to what's right and what's wrong. And those are legitimate things for voters to look at, to say if you're a faithful Catholic, which I try to be, fall short all the time, but I try to be, and it's a legitimate thing to look at as to what the tenets and teachings of that faith are with respect to how you live your life and how you would govern this country. With respect to what is the road to salvation, that's a whole different story. That's not applicable to what the role is of being the president or a senator or any other job.
Speaker Gingrich, do you agree with that?
Well, I think if the question is, does faith matter? Absolutely. How can you have a country which is founded on truths, which begins, we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights? How can you have the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which says religion, morality, and knowledge being important, education matters? That's the order. Religion, morality, and knowledge. Now, I happen to think that none of us should rush in judgment of others in the way in which they approach God. And I think that all of us up here, I believe, would agree. But I think all of us would also agree that there's a very central part of your faith in how you approach public life. And I, frankly, would be really worried if somebody assured me that nothing in their faith would affect their judgments, because then I'd wonder, where's your judgment? How can you have judgment if you have no faith? And how can I trust you with power if you don't pray? Who you pray to, how you come close to God is between you and God. But the notion that you're endowed by your Creator sets a certain boundary on what we mean by America.
Governor Perry, Mitt Romney asked you to repudiate the comments of that pastor who introduced you on that stage. He didn't make the comments on the stage. He made them afterward in an interview. Will you repudiate those comments?
Well, our faith, I can no more remove my faith than I can that I'm the son of a tenant farmer. I mean, the issue is, are we going to be individuals who stand by our faith? And I have said I didn't agree with that individual's statement. And our founding fathers truly understood and had an understanding of freedom of religion. And this country is based on, as Newt talked about, these values that are so important as we go forward. And the idea that we should not have our freedom of religion to be taken away by any means. But we also are a country that is free to express our opinions. That individual expressed an opinion. I didn't agree with it, Mitt, and I said so. But the fact is, Americans understand faith, and what they've lost faith in is the current resident of the White House.
Fine. Governor Romney, is that acceptable to you?
You know, with regards to the disparaging comments about my faith, I've heard worse, so I'm not going to lose sleep over that. What I actually found that was most troubling in what the Reverend said in the introduction was he said, in choosing our nominee, we should inspect his religion. And someone who is a good moral person is not someone who we should select. Instead, we should choose someone who subscribes to our religious belief. That idea that we should choose people based upon their religion for public office is what I find to be most troubling. Because the founders of this country went to great length to make sure, and even put it in the Constitution, that we would not choose people who represent us in government based upon their religion. That this would be a nation that recognized and respected other faiths, where there's a plurality of faiths, where there was tolerance for other people and faiths. That's bedrock principle. And it was that principle, Governor, that I wanted you to be able to say, no, no, that's wrong. Reverend Jeffress, instead of saying, as you did by that introduction, knock the ball out of the park, I just said, Reverend Jeffress, you got that wrong. We should select people not based upon their faith, even though, and I don't suggest you distance yourself from your faith any more than I would, but the concept that we select people based on the church or the synagogue they go to, I think is a very dangerous and enormous departure from the principles of our Constitution.
Would you still like him to say that?
I'm sorry?
Would you still like the governor to say that, or was that something you wanted him to say?
I'll let him. It's his choice.
Do you want to respond to that, Governor Perry?
I have. I said I did not agree with Pastor Jeffers' remarks. I don't agree with them. I can't apologize any more than that.
Yeah, that's fine.
We've got a question from the audience.
Currently, there's a deficit reduction measure to cut defense spending by $500 billion. Would you support such a reduction in defense spending? And if elected president, how will you provide a strong national defense?
Congresswoman Bachmann, should defense be cut?
Well, $500 billion is the amount that the questioner had mentioned. And don't forget, this was a historic week when it came to American foreign policy. We saw potentially an international assassination attempt from Iran on American soil. That says something about Iran, that they disrespect the United States so much that they would attempt some sort of a heinous act like that. Then we saw the President of the United States engage American troops in a fourth conflict in a foreign land. This is historic. Then on Sunday, we heard the reports that now that in Iraq, that the 5,000 troops that were going to be left there won't even be granted immunity by Iraq. This is how disrespected the United States is in the world today, and it's because of President Obama's failed policies. He's taken his eyes off the #1 issue in the world. That's in Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon. That makes all of us much danger, and the President of Iran is a genocidal maniac. We need to stand up against Iran, and as President of the United States, we will be respected again in the world.
The question, though, was about budget cuts, and is everything on the table in terms of cutting the budget?
Absolutely everything.
So defense spending would be on the table, should be.
Defense spending is on the table, but again, Anderson, now with the president, he put us in Libya. He is now putting us in Africa. We already were stretched too thin, and he put our special operations forces in Africa.
Want to make sure it's on the table.
It's on the table, but we cannot cut it by $500 billion. We can't do that to our brave men and women who are on the ground fighting for us.
I mean, if you want to understand how totally broken Washington is, look at this entire model of a super committee, which has now got a magic number to achieve, and if it doesn't achieve the magic number, then we'll all have to shoot ourselves in the head, so when they come back with a really dumb idea to merely cut off our right leg, we'll all be grateful that they're only semi-stupid instead of being totally stupid. Now, the idea that you have a bunch of historically illiterate politicians who have no sophistication about national security trying to make a numerical decision about the size of the defense budget tells you everything you need to know about the bankruptcy of the current elite in this country in both parties. The fact is, we ought to first figure out what threatens us. We ought to figure out what strategies will respond to that. We should figure out what structures we need for those strategies. We should then cost them. I helped found the Military Reform Caucus. I'm a hawk, but I'm a cheap hawk. But the fact is to say I'm going to put the security of the United States up against some arbitrary budget number is suicidally stupid.
Congressman Paul, you've proposed... Congressman Paul, you've just proposed eliminating the Departments of Commerce, Education, Energy, Interior, Housing, and Urban Development. You say it'll save $1 trillion in 1 year. You're proposing a 15% cut to the Defense Department. Can you guarantee national security will not be hurt by that?
I think it would be enhanced. I don't want to cut any defense. And you have to get it straight. There's a lot of money spent in the military budget It doesn't do any good for our defense. How does it help us to keep troops in Korea all these years? We're broke. We have to borrow this money. Why are we in Japan? Why do we subsidize Germany? And they subsidize their socialized system over there because we pay for it. We're broke. And this whole thing that this can't be on the table, I'll tell you what, this debt bubble is the thing you better really worry about, because it's imploding on us right now. It's worldwide. We are no more removed from this than the man on the moon. Is going to get much worse. And to cut military spending is a wise thing to do. We would be safer if we weren't in so many places. We have an empire. We can't afford it. The empires always bring great nations down. We spread ourselves too thinly around the world. This is what's happened throughout history, and we're doing it to ourselves. The most recent empire to fail was an empire that went into, of all places, Afghanistan. They went broke. So where are we in Afghanistan? I say it's time to come home.
Time. We just have a Twitter question. Given that Israel has just negotiated with Palestine for a soldier, would any of you negotiate for a hostage? Herman Cain, let me ask this to you. A few hours ago, you were asked by Wolf Blitzer if al-Qaeda had an American soldier in captivity and they demanded the release of everyone at Guantanamo Bay, would you release them? And you said, quote, I could see myself authorizing that kind of a transfer. Can you explain?
The rest of the statement was quite simply, you would have to consider the entire situation. But let me say this first. I would have a policy that we do not negotiate with terrorists. We have to lay that principle down first. Now, then you have to look at each individual situation and consider all the facts. The point that I made about this particular situation is that I'm sure Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had to consider a lot of things before he made that. So on the surface, I don't think we can say he did the right thing or not. A responsible decision maker would have considered everything.
But you're saying you could, I mean, in your words, you said that I could see myself authorizing that kind of a transfer. Isn't that negotiating with, in this case, al-Qaeda?
I don't recall him saying that it was al-Qaeda related.
Yeah, he did. He said...
Well, my policy would be we cannot negotiate with terrorists. That's where we have to start as a fundamental principle.
Senator Santorum?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, you can't negotiate with terrorists, period. To address Congressman Paul's answer and the other answer on military spending, I would absolutely not cut one penny out of military spending. The first order of the federal government, the only thing the federal government can do that no other level of government can do is protect us. It is the first duty of the President of the United States is to protect us. And we should have the resources, we should have all the resources in place to make sure that we can defend our borders, that we can make sure that, when we engage in foreign countries, we do so to succeed. That's been the problem with this administration. We've had political objectives instead of objectives for success, and that's why we haven't succeeded. And as Michelle said, and correctly said, the central threat right now is Iran. The disrespect, yes, but it's more than that. They sent a message. The two countries that they went after was the leader of the Islamic world, Saudi Arabia, and the leader of the, quote, secular world, the United States. This was a call by Iran to say, we are the ones who are going to be the supreme leader of the Islamic world, and we are going to be the supreme leader of the secular world, and that's why they attacked here. And by the way, they did it in coordination with Central and South Americans, which I have been talking about and writing about for 10 years.
Congressman Paul, you were referencing that answer. 30 seconds.
I think we're on economic suicide if we're not even willing to look at some of these overseas expenditures, 150 bases, 900 bases, 150 different countries. We have enough weapons to blow up the world about 20, 25 times. We have more weapons than all the other countries put together, essentially. And we want to spend more and more, and you can't cut a penny? I mean, this is why we're at an impasse. I want to hear somebody up here willing to cut something real. This budget is in bad shape, and the financial calamity is going to be much worse than anybody ever invading this country. Which country? Are they going to invade this country? They can't even shoot a missile at us.
We have a question in the hall that gets to your question. The question in the hall on foreign aid. Yes, ma'am.
The American people are suffering in our country right now. Why do we continue to send foreign aid to other countries when we need all the help we can get for ourselves?
Governor Perry, what about that? I mean... Yeah.